guys, Caterly here over at C Squared Social. We're really excited to share a conversation today with a very special guest. His name is Sean Douglas, and he's based out of chilly Vancouver, Canada. Just a little bit about Sean. He is the CEO and founder of Fran Pro Consulting, where he works with many different businesses helping build and grow their franchise systems throughout the US and Canadian markets. Prior to starting Fran Pro, Sean was the executive vice president of Modern Pure Air, and he's been in the franchise industry for many, many years. He is a complete expert, and he has a lot to share with us. So we're really excited to share our conversation and interview with Sean. So Sean, tell us a little bit about your background and your experience in the franchise world.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. So my background, I think it kind of led me to the path of what I'm doing today. And at the time, and as you're a young guy growing up, and I grew up in the insurance world, and I spent about 23 years of my life in insurance as a claims adjuster, as a broker, doing catastrophe losses for large losses for insurance companies. And during that time frame, what I did know, and that not at the time, was that I was learning to deal with disruption and deal with on-demand and deal with having to make decisions quickly, conflict resolution, win-win, all these sorts of things that you have to deal with as an insurance adjuster and a broker in that insurance and financial world. And so kind of fast forward to about 10 years ago, I was kind of headhunted by an insurance restoration firm of which I was doing business with every day. And it was a franchise model. So it was the brand Winmar. And they were looking to develop their brand in Western Canada. And they headhunted me because of my reputation in the insurance business and the fact that I knew everybody in Western Canada. So they wanted to get a big footprint. I reluctantly took a leap because I was quite comfortable in my career. And I jumped into the franchise sales world, even though it was kind of in my comfort space in that insurance and the restoration business. Mm-hmm. So in about 30 months, I was able to sell out that brand in a time frame that they expected would take 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
And I really got my, I worked myself out of a job. It basically is what happened. So what was great was that at the end of my tenure, it was mutual. We shook hands, and the owner of the business, John White, said, "Sean, you promised me the West. You gave it to me. We'll do business again. The world is round." I then spent about 12 months in another brand, kind of an ancillary business in the insurance world and the indoor air cleaning. And again, sold myself out of a job essentially. And that's when I went, just a minute, I'm doing something right. There's not a lot of folks in the franchise sales and development business. I'm going to jump in with both feet, and I'm going to create my own agency, which was the beginnings of Fran Pro, which was around April of 2016.
Wow. So you work yourself, like you said, out of a job. You say, my work here is done with Winmar. And was it Pure Air that you were working with at the time? Yeah,
Modern Pure Air, correct. Yeah.
Awesome. And so then at that point you said, my sales process is golden. What I'm doing is clearly working. Let's go into business for myself.
Yeah, and my background in sport also has been a real help because, you know that I do a lot of validation calls for C Squared, for other brands that are looking to A, use your services, and B, might need a little direction. So I'm a natural coach. I've been coaching for about 30 years of my life. I'm an athlete. And so I really use that in my daily communications with people. If they need opportunity or they need a coaching or a mentoring piece, I always offer that, and it's worked very, very well for us. Yeah,
and that's a huge part of today's call too. Is one thing that we admire so much about you, Sean, and working with you over the past few years is just your tenacity in the sales world. We know that you've got a really rock solid process. And I would love to be able to, share that with more of our clients and prospects. And we know that's such an important piece to closing deals. That's the key piece. So that's one thing too, is if you could walk us through kind of what's the method, what's Fran Pro's secret sauce?
Yeah, you bet. And so, to take a step back, when I launched Framco, I thought, what can we do that's different? Where's the opportunity? I did a SWOT test of competitors in the space and my background in kind of the corporate world of what worked and what didn't work. So I spent about 3 months researching process, what works, what didn't work, leveraging technology. How can we use that? That obviously led us to you guys. I spent about 3 months vetting C Squared until I realized what it was and how it worked, and it's been great for me. And so our process, we use the trademark phrase that we have, which is speed to lead. And so that's really the core piece of Frampro and the success that we have in the franchise sales industry. So what that means, it's a very all-encompassing word, and we use it in all of our context, communications, and operations every day. So we like to engage and we like to educate, and that's really, really focused on the communication piece. So what we do, I think that everyone says they do, but we really do practice it, is once a lead arrives to us, organically or through a portal or through a form fill out or obviously through C Squared, is we practice our speed to lead. We jump on it. So that could be anything from an automation that's a welcoming email, a text that comes through either for, a manual text that we send out and say, hey, thanks for your time. There's some information coming your way, or a call. If we're not on a call and I'm in my car or we're sitting at the desk and we've actually got a minute when the lead comes in, we immediately call those folks and we say, hey, listen, thanks so much for your time. Obviously, you're looking for some information. We're going to share that. Expect, an email and some follow-up, and we're going to get you lots of information. And oftentimes, if we play it right, they're still looking at the ad on the Facebook or the social media platform when we call them. And it's those instances where we actually wow the pants off them, literally, that they can't believe that they're talking to somebody from the brand, which is us, when they're looking at an ad and they're pondering what this opportunity may or may not be. So that out of the gate kind of sets the tone for expectations, and it really lets them know that the brands that we represent are responsive, and that really allows us going forward in that relationship to either want to do one of two things: determine if they're curious or interested, right? If they're curious, that's fine. We'll give them the information that we can, and we can capture them as a customer. And full circle, maybe ultimately they'll come back to that ownership opportunity. But at the end of the day, we really want to engage those people that are interested and get them into process. So that's kind of the core piece of our speed to lead. And we use a 48-hour touch. So every 48 hours, we touch that lead. Is it a text? Is it an email piece? Is it some information? Is it an informative brochure? Is it a story or a link to a YouTube clip that brand may be having? And in a matter of about 21 days, we can compress that engagement and vetting period and really determine whether these folks are going to be, put formally into process, into the FDD and the franchise side of things, or do they need some time to mature and really look at that opportunity, and we can put them into a long drip campaign. So we really are able to compress that engagement piece down to about a 21-day time calendar using that 48 to 72-hour touch method.
Wow. And I know, like, in today's day and age, when people are obviously they're glued to their phones, right? And we know that technology is so at the forefront of things. How do you feel like that has changed, the calling piece as opposed to texting? Do you feel like the majority of people that you do try to contact, like you said, when you wow the pants off them while they're looking at the ad, they see it, you call them. Do you typically get them on the phone that first time? We
do. We're about right now, the last time I checked, we're about a 52% engagement rate on the leads that we get for those initial first conversations. So do we leave lots of messages? Yes, we still leave lots of messages, but those 40 or 50% that actually will pick up the phone and talk to us, and we always make that first conversation very, very quick. We want to actually let the leads have the impression or the perception that they're controlling process, But at the end of the day, it's all engineered for us to control the time frame and the process itself. So if the demographic may change, younger people don't tend to pick the phone up as opposed to somebody, say, that's 35 or older. They like to, the younger folks, the millennials, if you will, like that texting piece, and they'll go to their email to look at information. And then people that are, maybe that Gen Xers, they will pick up the phone, they will talk to you. You'll get that back and forth in a text, but they'll be primarily an email type of a demographic. So we're learning, it's constantly changing of which works best. But I know I've seen a lot of articles and blurbs on bulletin boards and so forth about, the art of the cold call. And with technology, this is the basic piece of technology, which is the telephone. It still works. It still works well. You don't have to keep your conversations long. I respect people's time. And I think maybe that's why we're really successful with that, is our conversations are kept on point. We give the information that we need. We'll schedule another one through some scheduling apps that we use and get that really down to a point where we're not having hour-long conversations, because people obviously value their time. And what's neat is that the buyers that we're seeing, or the prospects that we see, we know they're looking for something, and we just have to convince them that the brands that we're representing are the ones that they should be looking at. So, that's really some of the critical key pieces in how we kind of approach what we do every day.
And how would you say social leads, in particular, do you think that they're a little bit different than, say, a portal lead or referral? And do you treat maybe one of those a little different than the other?
Yeah, I think they are to some degree. We treat every lead the same. They all have the same importance. They all have the same priority. I have my own personal opinion on quality of leads and where they come from. Portal leads tend to be tire kickers and curious people, but that may also mean that they're very early in process and they don't understand where they need to go or how the process may work. And our job is to kind of educate them on what that looks like. So for us, portal leads tend to drop off a little quicker. When you get organic leads that come through the brand themselves, which all of our brands, they tend to send those to us directly when they visited their site. Those organic brand-driven leads, those are usually somebody that's had an experience with the brand. They visited, they've shared the food, they've worked out at the gym. Those are really good leads because it's a warm lead to begin with. So those tend to engage a little quicker. And then the leads that we're getting through lead generation and the social media, they're generally people that are looking. There might be a little deeper in process. They spent a little time. They obviously know that they've provided the personal information to us to be contacted. So those people are generally somewhere between a portal lead and an organic lead that comes from, experience with the brand.
Mm-hmm. And you say, you keep touching them over and over again. Like, if they don't engage on that first phone call, let's say they don't pick up, what's really, how many times do you continue to call them? What does that schedule look like?
Yeah. And I get this from our folks as well. And when I'm doing my coaching with our brand pros cross country, is how often should I be calling these people? And there's no tried and true answer to that. And because there's some things that can happen. And I get folks on our side that, they get a little discouraged because, I've left a bunch of messages. At the end of the day, people are busy. People don't know the number, recognize the number. People might be on vacation. People might not be feeling great. These sorts of things. So we kind of factor that in. But then having said that, after about the fourth or the fifth message over a period of 5 to 10 days, that to us is an indicator that they're not either ready or they're not interested. So after about that 2-week or 10 business day period, we'll typically stop calling to lead messages and put them on a drip campaign. So in another week, we may send them a brochure. A week after that, a YouTube clip. And after about the 30th day, if they haven't hit the tennis ball back to us at some point, whether it's a response or a text or a voicemail, then we really understand that those people aren't ready to buy. We put them on long-term drip. And again, hopefully, and we send out all of our lead lists to our brands. They'll put them on their long-term drip, and we'll just capture them as a customer, and hopefully they come back to us. So, long answer short, between 4 and 6 calls in about an 8 to 12 day period is really when you know where the buyers are. Because I know if we look backwards in the last even 36 months of all the deals that we've actually successfully closed, every single one of those had an immediate return and some sense or some feeling of a sense of urgency to get information because they're ready to buy. They made that mental or financial commitment that this is something they want to do. And those types of prospects have a certain profile that we've really managed to capture that. And so we know what the buying signs are, generally speaking. And typically it is with that quick response or a quick email back. And by quick, I mean within minutes to an hour of seeing that ad, if we send them something and they come back to us to schedule a phone call, those are really key buying signs. And those are the ones we really start focusing on.
Yeah. So they're the ones who are showing signs that they're immediately ready and interested. Mm-hmm. For the, you mentioned the long-term drip campaign, which I think is so interesting. You know, we get a lot of clients that ask us, you know, when should we consider a lead a dead lead? And it kind of sounds like in your method that there is no such thing as a dead lead.
Correct. Because is that lead does that prospect become a non-buyer? Sure. And I like to use the term non-buyer. That person or people, they can become customers. So if we can get those people to those brands, and at the end of the day, the ad spend that we're spending on social media, that's a marketing ad spend. And so that there's still an effort to get your message out there and turn the volume up on your brand. Sure, it's intended to drive traffic for the purpose of sales, but you can also capture those people as customers. And so even though it's not really something that's trackable for the brands, those people are still important. So that long-term drip, what we use, we never get rid of the name. Once we have them in our CRM, I've had instances, and it's kind of funny, where they'll come back to us a year or two later, and they won't recognize the name, and they'll go into our CRM, and they were people that maybe didn't respond much, if any at all. And now they've come back to us. I just had one about 2 weeks ago for our Town on the Run brand. And I didn't recognize the guy's name, and he just wasn't ready yet. So when I called the brand, she's like, oh, I remember that guy. He wasn't ready. He was out in Banff, Canmore. And he's going to end up buying a franchise 2 years later. And if we would have deleted his name and I would have forgot about him, that was a missed opportunity.
Wow, absolutely. That's such a success story. And I think that's just such a good practice, is to think that truly nobody who, you know, is expressing interest, even if they're, you know, ready or not ready in that moment, it doesn't mean that further on down the line that they won't rise back up and become interested again.
Right. Yeah.
So what would you say is, you know, you do a lot of calling, a lot of texting, a lot of emails. Do you have kind of a specific message or method that you use in those texting, whether it be like always using a question or always putting a call to action in there? What do you think is the best at engaging folks in those messaging?
Yeah, great question. Leading questions work very, very well. Again, crafting our messaging on the basis that we want to let those prospects have the impression that they're controlling process. So it's always on their time. So do I want to have a phone call at 9:45 on a Friday night from somebody in Galveston, Texas? No, I don't. Will I take that call? Absolutely, because that's their time. So the interesting part of our biz is it's really 24/7. If you're committed to this business on our side of things, it's not a 9-to-5 job. 9 to 5 typically means that those people have jobs or are working those jobs. So and those time frames, we have to work. So lots of weekend responses, lots of weekend calls, weekend meetings if they're in the areas where we live and work and play. So, you really have to let that customer control the process on their time. So when we approach our communications, we really kind of keep that in mind. And, all of our Fran pros that work with us, they adapt that. And it makes for long days sometimes, but it's kind of what you have to do.
How many phone calls a day would you say you personally make?
Personally, I'm between 50 and 100.
Wow.
I try to not schedule more than 40 activities in a day, because if you actually have someone that you're working on, you're getting deeper into a deal and you're doing vetting and lots of these sorts of things, those are the calls that go a little longer. Those can be 45 minutes, hour and a half. Discovery calls can be an hour. So when those happen, that's good, but then we tend to back up. So we try to schedule between 30 and 40 activities max per day for follow-up. But oftentimes we'll see ourselves making or taking 50 to 100 calls each. So in any given day, with 9 of us across the country, we're 700 to 1,000 calls a day with FranPro.
Wow. Yeah, there's no way around it. If you're in sales, you got to be on the phone. That's for sure.
You do. And a lot of my calls, I take a lot of calls, right? Again, I'm very available. I make myself available to the industry, to my people, to everyone. So it really gobbles up my time. But as we build this business, we kind of getting that reputation that we are accessible. So when you're building something, you've kind of got to work 24/7. So my calls are extensive every day, if needless to say.
Yeah. And in today's day and age, when people don't necessarily love to pick up the phone every time, it's amazing when you can count on someone who's going to answer on the other end.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and kind of looking ahead at, 2020, obviously, so much can change in the world of social media, in franchise development. Like you said, the process can kind of change monthly, quarterly, daily, really. Where do you kind of see things headed in kind of technology wise, and how that might affect the franchise space in 2020?
Yeah, another great question. We built our business on technology. And so we're always trying to use technology to have an advantage of our competitors, but also keep in touch with those folks that are buying. And as the millennial generation ages, it's going to be more and more reliant on technology. So the technology that I see, obviously, lots of AI. We see sales reporting analytics, being more defined and then being understood on that customer experience element. That's a big catchphrase right now, is that customer experience. What's their experience in process? What's the experience in awarding? What's their experience as a franchisee? Mm-hmm. So really focusing on what that experience is. And we're trying to have a distinct customer experience with the FranPro process, which is, engagement and education and no pressure and these sorts of things. So that kind of gives us something a little different than opposed to a hard sell brand, which they're out there. We're not that brand. So that customer experience, I think, is very, very important. We're going to see sales apps in the future, right? That direct to consumer, or now they're saying human to human, age to age. Piece, right? I think that's coming if it's not there already. And then insights and dashboards, right? That are going to kind of drive data and pull data from whatever programs and apps and things that we're using, and give us those insights so that we can kind of use those analytics to kind of direct us and push us where we need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, on the social side, lots of new, strategies, things that we're seeing already at C-Squared Social, new ways to generate leads and kind of finding a way to make both of those worlds collide. To kind of include that in the sales process.
Yeah. And the big thing is the story. The story of the brand and the story of what that brand is super important. And it doesn't always come across in verbal communication or, in a brochure. So the ability to try and find and capture and deliver that message, that story of the brand, however that's going to happen is probably, I think, going to be a distinguishing piece as brands want to grow. And our ability as vendors in that industry to kind of use that, capture that, change that, deliver that, I think is going to be key.
Absolutely. Well, gosh, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all about your process. And man, it's always a pleasure speaking with you, Sean. We so appreciate it and love working with you.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. All right. You bet. Bye-bye.